Thank you for everyone joining. We are just waiting for a few others, and then we'll go ahead and get started in about a minute or so. All right. Again, welcome everyone to the Collaboration and Design Review webinar. My name is Christine Morris. I'll be your presenter today. Just a couple of things before we get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the Q&A panel of the Zoom meeting. We have some knowledgeable Altium employees standing by to get those answered for you. As well, there will be a recording made available, so you can have that and you can look for that later on in your inbox, same one you registered for in the webinar. So just to let you know that if you want to share that or review some of the things that we're talking about today, you'll have that as well. So I'll just go ahead and kick it off here. As you know, team collaboration is more important than ever. It's critical to be able to inform internal, external members of your team of last minute changes, including design changes, delays, component availability, even deadline changes, etc. The list goes on and on. And with heavier workloads, Altium 365 can help by using roles to assign clear responsibilities, assign tasks to ensure duties are completed, and commenting to inform team members of required changes that are needed. Whether that is from either the design side, maybe project management, suppliers or procurement, or even manufacturing and assembly, all those comments and items that need to be resolved can be placed in the Altium 365. So we'll show you how some of these features can be utilized today in this webinar. And here is just the kind of agenda what we're going to go through. I'm not going to go through each of them one by one, but you'll have a kind of an idea where we're going with this presentation. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm just going to jump right into the tools. And here in my Altium Designer, you can see I already created a workspace just to save a little bit of a time today because I know everyone's time is valuable, but you'll notice once you create that workspace, it is cloud-based, and I've been invited to multiple workspaces, so you see those in the list here. In the event you're a contractor or work with multiple companies, it's okay to be invited to their workspace. You just change them dynamically by switching between the two. This icon will allow me to open the workspace in a web browser view. Because it is cloud-based, it is a Git repository that all your data is securely stored in. And with that, you are able then to see all the data that is shared with you. If you are invited, or I should say, if you are the first person in your company to create your workspace, you become an administrator and an owner of that workspace. You can most certainly, the administrator can change that to any person that is needed. In addition to that, any person that is going to create a workspace, once one has been created, they just click on this little button and it will notify the administrator, letting you know that you've been requested to go ahead and be invited. So there isn't a need for have multiple workspaces. All that data is going to be contained in a single workspace for your organization. And if you have an Altium Designer subscription, you would be able to create a workspace, whether that is the standard, pro, or enterprise level. So just to let you know, and the other thing is the data is stored not only in the workspace, but a local copy is stored on your workstation as well. And that's just to ensure if you don't have connectivity to the internet for some period of time, you still have access to your projects and you would be able to go ahead and make changes. And then when you have a connection again, save those back to the server. And we'll kind of walk through these things as we're going through the webinar, but just to kind of get you familiar of what Altium 365 is as a whole. I have this project open, but what I'm going to do do because many may not know how to create a project initially when you're connected to the workspace. So I'm just going to go in and create a brand new project using my File New Project menu. We have templates, components, as well as managed items within the workspace when it's created. And here is a template for a project that I will use just so it makes it easy. It'll have its sheets in it already, so I don't have to create those one by one. It will add them. And I'll just give this my name of demo project 1, and it looks like I already have that. So we'll say, December. That's fine too. And now it's going to put it in version control, and that's an important one because I am the owner of the actual design. Until I put it in version control, I cannot share it with other people. And so it is that built-in Git repository that we're talking about here. And it also allows me to see the full history of the design when I put it in version control as well. So it'll track everything that's done from the inception of adding it to the server all the way through to completion. Now, when it's completed and it's actually created, I should say, we have our schematic document just like we normally would. You can go ahead and store, schematic templates in there if you needed. You have your PCB document as well that's been added to this. And in addition to that, you also have your out job files. These out job files that have been added automatically from the template is going to be very, very important when you go out for manufacturing. And if I look at each of these, you have your assembly, your pick and place report. If you're part of the documentation team, it might be important to have some of this reporting, especially when you go into a design review, to ensure that those documents really did get reviewed and they are part of the design, that there aren't any errors. You have that collection of documents for validation outputs already part of your particular project. In addition, if you're going out to fabrication, these documents are going to be very important to the manufacturer. And we'll show you how to release an entire project from within the Altium Designer environment a little bit later on. But you can imagine, so any person that is working within your team, whether that, maybe an engineer for building or drafters for creating the schematic, maybe it's an MCAD. We do support MCAD collaboration as well, to go ahead and start with a board outline that may be pushed from, your mechanical or driven from the mechanical side. So that form factor and shape might have been, from an enclosure that is required for a top assembly, for example. These things can be pushed across using the MCAD co-designer. And all that's required is and I should open up the PCB to see that, but under the panels button, it's built into the Altium Designer already. And you would just download a plugin for your mechanical tool, and then you would have this capability of pushing and pulling that PCB design and all the elements. So for those of you that might not be, the Altium Designer electrical engineer, you may be on the mechanical side, you still have the capability to collaborate as a team. And that data, again, is going to be pushed to the server and then pulled into your mechanical tool. And in the event that you don't have an Altium Designer license, which most mechanical engineers would not have, they can still go ahead and be invited to the workspace or a project and collaborate with you. And how that happens is you would then go ahead and register for a login for Altium 365 with your email address and set up a password, and you would log right into the server through that plugin that would be installed in the mechanical tools. So we're not going to go through that, but I just kind of want to talk to it to make sure that you are aware that you can go ahead and collaborate with your team members using MCAD Co-Designer as a starting point if needed, and especially for those that are, in the design process and you want to make sure that all that data and those mechanical constraints are pushed as well from the MCAD side. So now that I have this project and it's been pretty much built, what I want to do is I want to share this with a team member to show you the sharing capabilities. This is going to be a very important part because only requirement that we have and working with the design and collaborating with your team is to be managed in Altium 365. And one of the ways to do that and share the project is through this share dialog. It's the same share as a button up here in the upper right corner of your Altium Designer. And in this case, all you need to do is go ahead and type in the individual's name of who you want to add. I've already added Zach Hunter to my workspace, so he would receive an email that would invite him. And now I'm going to go ahead and share this project with him. It's really very important to note that when you're invited to a workspace, you can see components and you can see other team members. But unless you are explicitly invited to a project, you would not be able to see that. That's why this sharing dialogue is really important. And you can share from within the web view, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But these are the commands available. You can edit, give them editing permissions, which I will do, or viewing permissions. And we have our advanced settings that who you can share the project with, or this person that I'm going to share it with, and who can download those files. So these can be enabled to whatever is needed for your company needs and individual per user that you have invited to a specific project. At any point in time when you do the share, you will be able to see who has access. And what's nice about this is I can come in and remove permissions. In the event, like you can see, Zach is not part of my Altium domain. He is outside of my corporation. And if he's working with me as an external contractor, for example, or someone that is doing design outside of my workspace, at some point, I may want to remove him completely. I just come back in, remove him from this project, and he no longer has access to it. I would still require him to be removed from my workspace as well if I didn't want him to see other designs, but I can explicitly remove him from this one right here within the share items. So now that we have it shared, I'm just going to show you just for general placement, a couple of components. I'm going to place them on the schematic here. For those of you that may not have seen this before, it might be brand new. For those of you that have, bear with me. We're going to go in and we'll show the other elements as well. But here you can see these are just connectors that are part of, my particular workspace. They have already been added there. I'll just add this USB-C connector, and maybe I want to go in and do a micro SD connector as well. SD card, I should say, connector. In the event that I place them, now I could wire them up and so forth. But maybe I'm just a draftsman. Maybe I'm just doing placement and someone else is wiring. Well, while I have this on the schematic, I want to go ahead and I want to update these quietly. And in doing so, it's just going to annotate those designs, and then I'm going to run it through our engineering change order process to execute those and bring those into my PCB design. And all this is just a click of a button. You can see it brings in that sheet, which is really not required, but we can have that. And now I have my connectors on the board, and I can see them in 2D. They even have the 3D models. These are actually 3D bodies, but you could include in your footprints, step models, parasolid models, or solid part models. All of those can be attached at the footprint level, so you can view those in 3D here when you're in the Altium Designer. And again, they will push through the MCAD Co-Designer connector as well, which is a really nice feature. I've added this information or these components. So now I want to make sure that everyone that I've shared this with can see those changes. So I'm going to do the save to server. What that does is it does just a timestamp and a date of what has been changed during this particular push to the server. I'm just going to say added components. And also here you'll notice we have this comparison. We can compare schematics and PCBs. So in the event that before you actually push it to the server, maybe you want to do a comparison, it will open up in the web view, and we'll show this a little bit later on of how that is actually done for the comparison from the history of the design. But just to let you know, you can also do it here when you're saving it. And if there is something that is in conflict, maybe you want to go back and, review that before you save it all back out to the server, and then someone else checks out the design, starts working on it. When really you didn't want to have those. So that comparison can really come in handy there as far as collaboration amongst your team. So now I've saved all these changes back into the server. Zach would be able to see those. I'm going to go ahead and do a right click and show it in the web browser view, because this is where it becomes really nice. Anyone that doesn't have that Altium Designer license, like I said, they can go ahead and sign up for their Altium 365 credentials. And it lets me know there's a new visualization ready down at the bottom of my page. I'll just refresh that page to ensure that I have everything there. But notice the web view. It has the schematic sheets. It has the PCB that I can go in, I can navigate, I can even see layers. I can, make them visible or not. I can even see the view of the stack up here. And over on the right-hand side, if I needed, I could even place a comment, about thickness or the layer stack up or whatever it may be here in the web view as a communication tool back to my engineers or whomever on my team I may be working with. In addition, we have, if I come back into the PCB level, you'll notice you can do point-to-point measurements, objects to objects. You have the search. If I wanted to go and look for that CN1, I can go ahead, select it, and it will isolate it and show it. And I can even cross-reference into the 3D mode, and it shows in that view as well, or in the schematic view. So you can see those items are highlighted as far as cross-probing between each of the tabs within the web view as well. Not only that, if you're not sure of how to navigate within the tools, zooming in, zooming out, panning and so forth. If you're in 3D mode, you want to rotate, it's a left mouse button click and dragging around your mouse. These are commands that you can go ahead and use very, very easily. And it's pretty intuitive. In addition, we even have the board information. So if you have rights, and that's why we were talking about the sharing rights of a project initially, you would be able to download the project as well. If you do not have permissions, it will warn you and say, you don't have permissions to do this. So someone knows to contact someone else in the workspace in order to get those permissions provided for them. In this is our commenting. Because I've only placed the actual, components at this point, I can go in here, and if I want, I can place a comment, and I can make a comment to my entire engineering team. And if we have roles set up, it's really nice. If you are using or you have the pro subscription or enterprise subscription level for Altium Designer, you would be able to include or assign roles within the workspace and allow individuals to be added to that. And I'll show that in a little while here and how you would set that up in the Altium 365 environment. So now I can say, ready to wire schematic. Not typing so well. There we go. And I can even assign this as a task to myself, but I want to make it a comment. And tasks are really important because if you are, say, overseeing the project or a project manager or a stakeholder, you may want to see all the tasks that need to be completed prior to going out to, say, production, or going from prototype to production, or fabrication or assembly. All those tasks need to be signed off or actually, moved to the resolved state in order to get to that next level. And here, when I post this, what happens is the engineers would be notified then that there is a schematic that is ready and set to be wired up. And I can convert this to a task at any point in time in the future. I can also edit, delete, or copy a link to this if I need to share it with someone, or even resolve this. So it's a really handy way of communicating detailed tasks and assigning them to the individual or group or role that needs to go ahead and follow through with that particular function. With that, if you didn't want them to be displayed, you can still go ahead and make those so they aren't visible, because you might get a lot of these, and especially if you have a large number of people working within the same design, they can get really busy, and so sometimes you don't want to see all of those, and you have the option to enable what you want to see also for those. So now that I've posted this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this open project in the Altium Designer. And I will just go right back in and I'm going to open up my schematic sheet and notice immediately I see that comment. And what's nice about this is I can take immediate action. I can go ahead, and if I am one of the engineers, I can type in, at engineers, and let them know that, what, I'm going to begin wiring that schematic. So no one else in the team is going to go and try to do the same thing. And that's where it really is nice, because you can see that whole timeline as things are progressing through, whether that's on the schematic, the PCB, the layer stack up, even in the draftsman, you have the ability to comment on a design. And we've just recently included that in the bill of materials to be able to comment as well. So you can imagine how robust that can become, especially if you have a very large design or a lot of people working within your organization. And if not, it's even to track so you can keep those comments. And again, right here, I have the same ability to go in and go ahead and resolve those at any given point in time, or convert them or edit them and make sure that everyone is across those changes. So just a little bit about our commenting and how you're going to create a project from scratch when you're connected to the workspace, and see how that really works. With that, I also, while we're here in the comments and tasks, this is where you have some settings. You can see unresolved ones only, or the current document only, if that is something that is really, you only want to work on this particular portion of the design. In addition, you have your notifications. If you are someone that is a stakeholder, you probably would want to see all those comments and receive an email as they are being done, especially when you have critical deadlines. That's a really important one, because those notifications it's almost like a checkoff list that is running, that you're notified of each of those changes once they are completed, or a change has happened on, a particular item that has been requested by another member of your team. You can also just select them, to yourself, or if you don't want to be notified, maybe you're the only person, you don't need all those notifications, that's fine as well. You can put it to none. Just click the update button and you would have that capability. You can also filter on just tasks, because again, it can get quite numerous in the amount of comments and tasks. Maybe you just want to see those tasks. It will only highlight those here in the panel. Or if I want to only see what's assigned to myself, that's even better, because then I have that running list, and at any point in time, I would be able to see those comments strictly for my own use. So those are our comments. What I would like to do, though, is I want to go back into the web browser view and just show where you're going to add those roles in case you haven't set those up. You're a pro user, enterprise user, and you really want to go back in and do that. This is where you will be able to go in, and this is the first web view. Any web browser that you have is appropriate. You'll just log in, and here you'll see the projects that you can open up. You can open, share, edit, clone, delete, and even on the right-hand side, we have some valuable information, not only who it's shared with, but also any activity that's taken place on any given point of that particular design. And what's nice about that is I can share the project right from here as well. Maybe I don't have an Altium designer license. I can still share my project as a team member and make sure that, everyone is included in that. We also have our components. These components have been released to the Altium 365 server. Everything in this list is organized by component types. So as you can see, I have a name, a footprint, a description, and even here I can open a data sheet, show it in Octapart. I can even delete it from this list. Or if I need to see the symbol and footprint, I have a good preview of what components are in my workspace. Not only that, if I go back one level, I have our library health. For those librarians that are in our audience, I highly recommend that you go ahead and start looking in and how you can utilize the library health monitor. This basically will give you the entire compilation and a report of everything to do with your supply chain, component details, duplicates, and models. And you can see any outdated models, any duplicates by name, any uncategorized components. You can come in, any stock issues, imagine being part of your procurement team, and you realize that, these components that you are wanting to design in, or your team, you realize there is no stock. Look, if I select this item, for example, it has 0 stock. Immediately, that's a red flag. If I'm not going to get this in maybe 6-9 months of lead time, I either need to substitute a part, or I need to figure out a redesign of that particular circuit. So as you can imagine, this becomes invaluable, and it might start at the engineering level, or it might, because you're in the design process and schematic and, placing components, wiring up, and making sure that everything is accurate on the actual physical design, maybe you're not even aware until after the fact. If you have your procurement team as part of your your web view here, and they've been added in, they can start sourcing this data way before any deadlines come in, and they can take action or allow that engineering team to be way ahead of the game, just due to the fact that they have access. And here you can even show it in Octopart. You can open it in the desktop. If there needs to be edits, all edits are going to take place in Altium Designer. They do not take place in the web view. It's strictly for viewing, commenting, seeing tasks at a high level view, and then assigning roles and so forth. But you can open it up in the desktop, and that's where the edits are going to be made, whether you're saving off to the server for your design changes, adding new components and migrating them into the workspace, or, maybe you're just updating here, a new component per se. But all these items are included here within the components view and in the dashboard of the Library Health Monitor. Here are our tasks, and these are a really important one because, and we'll look at these a little bit later too, but this is just a great view of the Kanban board of every single task that is open on this particular design. And if you select any one of these, you can see I can go in and I can make changes, either who it's assigned to, for the priority or the status of that. If it needs to change based on something that I've just learned, I can create or increase that priority and then even reassign it. Maybe someone's out on vacation. I have an overview of every single item that is open or has been assigned, including things that have been resolved. So you can see how important this can become, just as an overview in the web. And this is just, again, the web view. I can take action in the Altium Designer. With that being said, I'll move on to the admin tab. This is where you're going to assign the roles, the important piece of the equation. And this is really the delegation of who's going to do what, especially when it comes down to that design phase, right? We have our engineering role that you can see here. If you click on the 3 radial dots over to the right and you click edit, you'll be seeing all the members of the engineering team at this point. All that's required is to add additional members here, and then their email address, and at that point in time, they become a member of that particular role. In the librarian's role, I can add that member, and I'll just add John Watson. I work with him here at Altium, and I'm going to add his email address. And normally it just shows I should have there, his name will populate it. I didn't put the period in there, but it will add any members that are part of your team into that new role if they're already part of your workspace. So you just have to type in the role, start typing in their name, first name, and then it will pre-populate with that member. And if I go ahead and update this, then John will be part of my librarians team as well. If I want to add a new role, I can do that also. And I can add a suppliers rule, because maybe, someone in my team, I have Max, right? He is external to my organization, but I want to make sure that he can see all the data that I'm going to share with him. So I can go ahead and add him, create it. He'll receive an email. He can log in. If he doesn't have his Altium Designer credentials, again, he can go ahead and register for an Altium 365. At this point, now I have all my members, my mechanical engineers I don't have have any members there, and my manufacturers, I should add someone if they're part of my workspace. If they are not part of my workspace, I can still share designs with them. And the important piece of that is, and just to show you, here are the workspace members that I currently have, and I've added previously. But if you're not a workspace member, you can see all the data that's shared with you in the shared with me. They won't see any of these other items. All that will open is that particular project or the shared with me item, and each of these would then be listed out. And at any point in time, they would be able to open and see everything that I just showed in the web view, based on their permissions, which are set when you initially share that design. So as you can see, those workspace members, when they're invited, you want to make sure that you know explicitly that you want them to see other data, because if you don't, you want to make sure you only show or share, those projects, because once they're part of your workspace, they see all your components and other workspace members. So now I'm just going to go back, because that's kind of just the overview of how you'll set up roles, making sure that everyone's assigned the appropriate role when you're invited to the workspace. And we will go and look at how you are going to go ahead and release a project for manufacturing. And I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to close out this project, and I'm going to open up this COMME project. It's already open. I just need to go ahead. And in my comments and tasks, what I was talking about, what's nice here, and let me just open one of these documents. I know that my colleague, it's just taking a moment, has created a task for me. So here, if this task for this particular design was created by some member and assigned to me, and this was 3 hours ago, you can see it says the component seems to be out of date. Please update to latest revision. What's nice about this is if I go into my comments and tasks, if I click on this hyperlink here, I'm already in my schematic document, but if I click on the hyperlink, it brings me right back in to the workspace, shows me exactly where that task was assigned, the details about it, and who assigned it as well. So not only do I see that there in the Altium Designer, I have a hyperlink to go back and check, like, when was this done? Maybe the last time I opened up my design, it wasn't there. And now if I were to go ahead and if I put this to an in progress state, it's automatically going to shift it over in my task, which is nice. And you can drag and drop these to any location that you choose as far as the comment is concerned, and it will then go ahead and follow through until it's resolved. In this case, what I'm going to do is I can go in and I'm just going to look at what's going on with this component by double clicking on it. And here you can see that it is truly out of date, just like Abe in my team had shared with me. I'm not going to do it here from the properties panel, even though I know I can update. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my bill of materials, because like I had said earlier, we can comment in the bill of materials as well. He commented in the design, but I can make a comment here if I chose to. And what's nice about that is in this case, if I do a search, it was C5, I believe, what he had been talking about. And this one, not recommended for new designs. If I wanted to go ahead, I should be able to select it and then right click in any area and operations and then update it. So now at this point, I can go ahead and update to the latest version. I could even select an alternate item if I needed to, or I could change that component to something that is already in my workspace, just switch that right here in the Altium Designer. In my case, I'm just going to make sure that I follow along with the comment that Abe had made to me and ensure that that is updated. So now if I go back in to my schematic, and I look at this comment again, I can, let Abe know that I have updated the component. And so now when this is actually resolved, and I'll put it to a resolved state, we will then be able to see that that no longer is my list to do here in the comments panel. And anyone looking at that final list would be able to see then that it has been resolved. So really, really important. And one last thing about the comments, because in a design review, a lot of times you need to have those comments, as part of your design. Here under the comments and tasks, you can export those for all time, any comments that were made, or a specific release. And then you can also include the entire snapshot, design snapshots, or the original design screenshots as well. So you can imagine how valuable this is, especially when someone comes into a design rule or review, and you're supposed to go out to production with that item, and you have comments that you did a report on said, you know what, this wasn't resolved. How easy is that to go back and track or see who exactly signed that comment? I mean, it is invaluable in the design process, especially when you're collaborating with a larger team, to be able to see these comments, act on them, and then at a higher level, step back and say, you know what, these aren't resolved prior to sending it out to fab and then realizing later we have to go into a respin of this board, or we have to spend time on something that we didn't really consider in the deadline. So I highly recommend, if you haven't, worked with those comments, haven't seen those, start working with them, because they're really easy to put into any design. With that being said, I'm now going to switch over and just so you can see the draftsman, because I didn't open this originally, I'll show you the comments that were placed in that. And I think it's just a great example of how powerful this really can become. So here in the Kami project, and you can see this one, it was, and can you see that? Check mounting hole size. This was actually on November 9th that this comment was made. And if that is still not fixed, imagine how much delay is going to be added to my design. So, and even here for documentation purposes, here's another one, please change the scale of this view. That might be a completely different team from the engineering team, the documentation team, and now they're trying to produce all this for the product that's about to be released to production, yet we don't have scaling right. This is the valuable piece that really Altium 365 really brings light to some of these areas that commonly is exchanged via email or, through a Skype or a Slack message, and, resolved there, but never really, maybe someone is so busy that they forgot to put it into the design, unfortunately, and the Gerbers were created, and now there are issues. So again, we can prevent that by, just checks and balances that are built in for us, provided we choose to use those tools that are available. Now, with that, one last thing that we wanted to show here is I really wanted to get into the PCB dock and show you how you're going to release for manufacturing, because this is going to be one of the final steps, and you might have multiple releases of any given design, different iterations, different versions that are coming out. It might be the next phase of your design, of course. With that being said, everything when we go into the project releaser is going to be based on the out job file settings. So whether that's documentation, whether that's assembly, whether that's fabrication, these out job files is what drives the project releaser. And when I open that, you can see these are all the items that will then be created. And what's even nice about this is we have comparisons, and we'll go into that. We have BOM comparisons, schematic comparisons, even PCB comparisons. So all those items can be part of the reporting or documentation process. In addition is our fabrication outputs. This is going to be very pertinent for the person that is my manufacturer. And I might be going out, to 3 or 4 manufacturers and the best price and our best lead times. These are all valuable things that we take in consideration when we are working within a design team and responsible for getting that particular project out the door. With that being being said, we make it very easy in the Altium Designer to use the project releaser. Once we set up our out job files, then we can run our project releaser, and what it does automatically is it picks up my fab and assembly. And if I look at these details, I even have a variant, but I won't run that today because of time, and I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. But you can configure each of these documents within the Altium Designer. And then when we go ahead and run the releaser here by the prepare and release button down below, it will double check each of those based on the configuration that I have set. And if there's any errors, it will flag me. I cannot move forward. It will not allow me to release this project. So that's a great check and balance again behind the scenes. You can see also it appends a revision number. If you are using our standard subscription, you cannot revise this number. However, if you're in the Pro and Enterprise subscription, you have the availability to create revision numbering, and that is what is used here based on this particular release. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I will go in and I will release this, and what it will do is it'll create all of those documents, run through them one by one, and then show the details. Notice I made a lot of changes here. I updated that component, made it to the latest revision. So I need to save those to the server first before it will allow me to commit. And now I'll just say, you know, this is going to be release A15. It'll be A16 for this one. And because I haven't done my variant, you notice this has an A.12. So when I go ahead and I release that variant, I will be probably out of sync there a little bit. But if there weren't any changes on the assembly for my variant, it's really not going to impact the overall design. But these are things that you want to be mindful of when you're producing, you know, this particular documentation to support the design. And as long as you know how the tool is functioning, it makes it very easy, you know, in those conversations that you might be asked questions around, you know, revisioning or why is this at one level and another. You can see it right here, and you can even get back up to that revision if you would like. You just enable that option and then re-release just that portion if they need to be synchronized. So again, we'll see and wait for this. And this is what I was talking about earlier. If I did a compare right now, what it's going to do is it's going to ask me to compare against a previous version that has already been released of a Gerber file. And it will prompt me into the web view. So it'll do a side-by-side comparison, and we'll show that in a moment. After I show the manufacturing data, we'll go in and show a comparison just so you can see how that data is actually presented within the Altium 365. Again, just another check and balance to ensure that everything looks right before you go out, you know, and have to do a respin. If something isn't right, you catch it early, or your manufacturer catches it early. That's wonderful. You know, that's time and money that is in your organization for other things. It's almost completed here. So we'll see those independent, you know, files that are again going to be saved to my local drive. And also I have to put in my final release note because I went ahead and said everything was going to be good with this release. And then in our history, we'll be able to track all that. And we can go back, we can even revert back to other versions of the design if needed. Maybe we made a mistake somewhere along the line and we have to revert back. You can even do that in the Altium Designer. If you're in the history, it allows you to revert back to a previous version. And that's going to be from the right-click menu of the project. But lots of, like I said, lots of tools to really make you efficient, especially when you're collaborating with your team. So here's our source data, each of the individual files, as well as the fab and the assembly. And now if I go into the web view, we will see this actual release, and you'll notice here it is always going to bring open a new tab. So, you know, if it refreshes and you open it in the browser, it'll add an additional tab here. But now I have this releases, and we will notice here is this last release, and I put A16, but notice I made an item. So I may even want to go back just to make sure. I might want to re-release that as A15. I took it to the next revision number, which it should have been the A15, which was showing on my screen. However, if you need, you can send this whole package here by configuring what you want to send, source, fab, or assembly, to anyone that may be external and working on this particular design, whether that is the contract manufacturer for assembly, maybe it is the fabrication house, but you can see it's going to append that revision. And even here, I don't want to change this revision. I made the mistake, and it's a personal error. You can see how easy it is to do. But here, if I go ahead and send this, you know, I might want to revise that without having it send and then be confused and then have that person come back to me. But all I need to do is go in and say Max Wright, manufacturing, send this off, and I will be able to see that release, and we can open up the exact details of whatever is in there as well. So again, very, very easy. It's almost a push button of how you can get this out to your manufacturers quickly. It does not have you sharing designs through via email or Dropbox or however you commonly do that. You can see here, now I have a running list of each of the versions that have been sent previously. And if I want to open that to see what they're going to see when they go ahead and click on the link that I received via email, they're going to see parameters about this project, you know, 2D, 3D, layer stack information. Not only that, here in the fabrication, this is where it becomes valuable again. They have all the layers. They can turn things on and off to see the visibility. You know, if they don't want the top layer, maybe they don't want the bottom layer, maybe they want to just look at the internal layers. You have full capability. They can view the layer stack up, ensure that the thicknesses are right, you know, everything's in the right order. They can make a comment back to you if they want it on the fabrication details. You would be able to see that, you would be notified. In addition, you have the assembly. And what's nice about this is you can see the board assembled as they would be able to see it. And this is what they're going to view. Their expectation is very high. You know what? And when it's assembled, this is what it's supposed to look like. These are the components that are on the board. Not only that, you have your full bill of materials. So again, across the whole entire design team, whether that is, you know, the draftsman, the electrical engineer, the mechanical engineer, you know, supply chain, assembler, manufacturer, all these individuals can be invited to your workspace or an individual project and see exactly what we've seen here today. Not only that, you know, the stakeholders, which, you know, are going to really be the ones that are overseeing everything, they may need to see those tasks and what isn't finished so they can really drive that timeline to a better, you know, or a quicker solution. And these are ways that we can do that very, very easily. The one last thing I will show, and then we will go ahead and open it up. And I meant to go back into the project here. So I was in that manufacturing view, but here, if I just go ahead and open this back up, is we will look at the full history of this design as well. And before we get there, because we're talking about manufacturing and assembly, if you open it up, this is really nice. This is in beta right now, but we have an assembly view that you can step through, and you can see there's a start button down at the lower left corner, and it will step you through each and every single footprint on your board, whether it's on the top or bottom, to ensure, and notice it turns green when everything is checked off. And if there's an error when you're viewing this in the web view, imagine how quickly you can get that changed. How many times have you sent out a board? I know it's happened to me. You sent out a board, the wrong footprint comes in, lo and behold, you're wiring that up, you know, you're going to get your soldering gun out, jumper wires to make sure that those footprints are correct, or you wire in the right one. So to avoid that, this is a great new feature that's coming in beta that can prevent all of that from happening. And the history is where we're going next. That will be included here in the workspace again when you have that project open. This is the wonderful timeline of every single release. You can see here any one of these commits. This is a save to server. I can do comparisons. I can even tag them. That's this purple. If that's considered a tag, and allows you to see milestones of a design as it is being produced. So really, really easy. You can see this is 12, this is 13, this is 14. Any given time that I've committed something and it's going to be my release number, I might want to tag that as well. In addition, the red color is the physical release that has been done for each of these. In fact, if I wanted to say, let's go up to the top one, and I wanted to pick one of these, and I want to do a comparison, say, of a previous commit or the previous release even, I can do so. And it will show me a side-by-side comparison of a schematic. And I could do this now for my BOM compare. I can do it for the schematic compare. And we're bringing in the PCB as well. So any one of those, or your Gerber compare, which is a big one also, it's going to open up in the viewer just like you see here for any one of those comparisons that you may do. And on the left-hand side, when it prepares it, you will see those differences. So that makes it really nice. And I happen to pick one that's not fair. I picked one that is identical as far as the schematic design. Let's go back and let me just do that one more time. So we have something. I'll do a previous commit. We'll do like 11. And you just select them from the list here. We'll do 13. So we can actually hopefully see a comparison. My apologies. But once this opens up on the left-hand side, you see the changes and you can select them one by one. And imagine how valuable this is when you're sitting in a room and they may be in different locations. You know, you might have people all around the world and you can say, you know what, let's log into the workspace and let's actually, you know, do a Zoom meeting. This is what I see, you know, where is this at? How valuable this can be because everyone's looking at one single source of data. And now you can see there is a modified component here. And this is that updated one, lo and behold, of what changed for that C5. And I can see that one by one. And, you know, if there's multiple schematic sheets, it just shows them here in the thumbnail. You select the one and one by one down the list as you go through those. So again, invaluable if you are really wanting to communicate as a team internally and externally all the information that is provided right here in the Altium 365. I want to keep it open for questions. Again, I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully you learned something new and how you can go ahead and implement that in your own corporation. And we are here to help. If you need anything, please let us know all through our support channels. We're glad to get you anything or questions answered about any of what you've seen here in this webinar. In addition to that, we have the rest of the time to open up for questions. And thank you for those folks that have answered those in the Q&A that already came in. I appreciate your help there as well. And just to remind you, there is going to be a recording made available to you so you can review this at your leisure or pass it along to other team members that may not have been able to participate today. So thank you again. We appreciate your attendance. And a question came in, does the compare allow you to go and bring back in Gerbers from a previous PCB list? Yes, it does a comparison. So in that history, when I selected the comparison, I selected a different version of the schematic, and that's what it does. This is a version 13 to a 15, same with the Gerbers. So any of those documents, you would be able to go ahead and see that comparison with. And that is the build that I'm using is the 2211.1. So that is our latest one that has been released. If you are in an earlier version, that may not have been implemented. And for those of you that want to know where the what's new, we have an Altium 365 what's new page now, which is phenomenal. And it allows you to see all of the changes because now we are doing changes almost weekly in the Altium 365, new features and so forth. So I encourage you, we have a What's New webinar that is coming up next week on the 7th. So if you are available and would like to see some of the new features, please attend that. We welcome you and we want you to be able to work with some of these features and especially those coming in new. You know, it might be your first preview of them. It's always nice to kind of see what you're going to be working in prior to getting started, you know, kind of have a visualization of how it should work. So again, we'll wait here for any questions. I know some of those might be still being typed, so I don't want to end the session too soon. And it looks like Abe is working. Another question, can an external document be included in a release? Yes, you can add them to the project. However, they will not open in the Altium 365 view. It will show you here in the project, like if it's an Excel or Word document. As far as the design documents, is if you expand this, you will be able to see them here in the list of source documents, but you will not be able to open them in the web view and see them explicitly, but they are part of the design. Great question. And they are working on getting that visibility into the viewer, but it's still a work in progress. So you can stay tuned for that in future as well. You're very welcome.
Christine, I believe you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was muted. I must have bumped my mic. Yeah, so here in the, when you create that new project, as you've probably seen my screen, here under the new project, under the advanced tab, when you're creating it brand new, this is where that local folder storage is going to be. So wherever you select that on your local drive, in my case, it's to the default location, that's where you'll see all your projects stored. Hopefully that answers your question. And you can always do the right click and show, or excuse me, the explore. That's this button here. And if you're not sure where it was saved to initially, maybe you weren't the one, and you open up the project, when you go ahead and do a file open, it still will create a local copy and save it. So you can always do that explore and it will still be saved there, provided you open the project in Altium Designer. So hopefully that answers your question. My apologies for bumping my mic there. And for the download options in Altium 365, the way you're going to do that typically is through the components panel. If you need to get your components out for some reason, here under the components panel in the all category, you have these that you can go ahead, and any one of these I can select, and I would be able to right click and under operations download. I can also do that through Explorer if needed. You have also in the content cart, you can go ahead from the Explorer panel. You can select any components that you want. You can add them to the content cart, and you can bring them into an intlib as well. But they're not going to be the entire library, unfortunately. You will have to choose which of the folders that you want to go ahead and export out. So here too, and you can see operations, and you can go ahead and add to content cart. And when you do this, what it does, it will show me in detail that particular component. And then here, I can go ahead and save it out to an intlib file. And that wherever that location is pointed to, that's where that intlib file would then be created. But again, we don't have an export all. And as far as the designs you have, you can download those from within the actual projects here and be able to go ahead and, or from Explorer. I don't think we can do it anymore from here. You would need to do those from the workspace itself in the web view. So to download, the Explorer doesn't allow you to go ahead and remove projects, but that download button is going to be your friend when you need to take things out. Yes, someone else asked, could you please show one more time how you navigate comments and tasks? Within the Altium Designer, if you have a task that's already been created, the panel is going to show up here. And if you open that up, you would be able to see if you have a schematic already open, and you go into the comments and tasks, you would be able to see any tasks that have been assigned. And this is really nice. Like I had said here, if you have this particular item, what it does is it should prompt me in, and that's the supply chain. So that's that one. If I wanted to review in the draftsman document, this is a draftsman one. Let me just close that. So this is the actual check mounting holes comment. I just can click down here where the text is, and it will bring me into that schematic sheet. Also, if I'm in the web view, then I can see my comments using the show in web browser. Those would be available in the actual design. Typically, you'll see all those comments. If I have a schematic sheet open and I open up the comments, in this case, I think it was the CPU that we added, or the power document. I should have been able to see that here as my running list. Even the activity, if I looked at the activity of this design, I should be able to see that when it's open as well. But these are the tasks that have been assigned that may have been comments and converted to a task. This is where you would find all of those. And you can see there, it's going to give me my running list in the web view as well. But in the particular design, you should be able to see any of those comments right here from the comments panel if you open it up. Or if you want to create a new one, you just click the place button. So hopefully that answers your questions about where you can find those. And of course, you always want to make sure, if you need to go ahead and report those out, if you're in a schematic document, you can export the comments through the reporting. Great question. All right, it looks like we're about on time here, and maybe there's one more. In the BOM dock, can an alternate part be added within Altium 365 due to the supply chain inventor issues? Great question as well. In the BOM dock, if you're in the Altium 365, you will not be able to choose parts there, but you can make a comment and let someone know in that BOM dock here. Oh, and in the BOM dock, I'm sorry, my apologies. I was thinking for the BOM that was created from here. Here, you can create a comment, and you can place that on any line, and it will allow you to place that comment. So here, if I do place comment, and if I wanted that particular comment, I can do an @mention to my engineers or supplier. And I can say, please check stock, and I can post that. So this comment then, I would be able to post on the bill of materials, and that would then go out to my team of the suppliers, and they would be able to take action on it. So yes, you can comment in the BOM of the project in the web view, but you would not be able to make a change here to make that correction. Unfortunately, you have to make all the changes in the Altium Designer tool for alternates and so forth. Another question, is it possible to show a little bit more in compare tool? Is it possible to side-by-side differences between two versions? Great question there. The side-by-side view is not available at this time. It's only per tab as you're navigating through. It does a comparison and it shows the list, but it does not do a side-by-side of each of those in the same window. You showed the capacitor, which will be modified, but it didn't clearly, but I didn't clearly see what it was changed, the value, the footprint, the pinout, and so on. Oh, my apologies. For that particular task that was closed, it was an out-of-date component. And that task, if I go back into my Altium Designer on the power sheet, so here, when I open it up, this was out of date, this particular component. So there was a version that was released of that component by probably a librarian in my team that had updated that revision, but I had an earlier version on my schematic. So when I received that comment from Abe, it was letting me know that that particular component is out of date. There's a newer version of it. And I opened it up here just to show that it was out of date. Now I've done that update, so it's no longer out of date. But when I opened up the BOM dock, I searched on that component as well. So I could actually see that it was truly up to date from the operations. And notice that isn't available to be pushed to the latest revision anymore because I've already made that change. But this is where, when you were talking about, the other person was talking about, you know, how can I choose an alternate item? It's going to be within the Altium Designer through the BOM dock. And that's why those comments are really invaluable, because I know immediately what component someone's already reviewed that data. They're sharing with me, you know, Christine, go and choose a different alternate item. And I can go ahead and do so. You know, I will go in and it will go ahead and it will allow me to go into my workspace, and I can choose another one and just click OK, and it will update with that new component wherever it is. And I'm not even sure what item I selected. That's a capacitor. Okay, this, we could go ahead and we can select that one if it had the supply chain data. And now I have that new alternate component there. So again, really, really easy way of making those edits. And like I said, those comments are the initiation of me being able to go ahead and resolve an issue or something that needs to change so I can go out to production with this design. Yeah, all edits are going to be primarily in the Altium Designer tool. Another question, can I get an ActiveBOM working with a multi-board project yet? We are still, for the multi-board project, we are still working on viewing that in the Altium 365. You can most certainly store it in the server, and all those details for the ActiveBOM are in the works. Once the viewing capability is available for multi-board in Altium 365, I would suspect the ActiveBOM will be there as well. It's just because we can't view those yet, you wouldn't be able to see the ActiveBOM before the schematic and PCB view is available. Great question. Yeah, as you can see, the development of Altium 365 is very, very quick. We're always been accustomed in the Altium Designer tools, you know, like 1 to 2 release, maybe 3 or 4 during a year. Now with Altium 365, they're pretty much weekly or bi-weekly for releases. So it's a lot of improvement in the tools. Another question, can a multi-board project import more than one step file yet? At this point in time, no, that isn't possible. If you have, again, they're working on that functionality, so you can see those at a system level for multi-board design and that connectivity between those boards. So stay tuned for that. Great question though. What is the difference between using an alternate part versus adding a solution? An alternate part, again, is basically you're choosing a completely different component, where a solution is just the supply chain. So you might have 5 different suppliers. See, as you can see on my screen here, I have Mauser, DigiKey for this, you know, a couple of different part numbers from DigiKey. These are the supply chain. This is actually manufacturer. And notice the manufacturers are different here. So my supply chain is going to give me my stock and volume. This is a completely different component in itself that I've added to my BOM dock. Is a PDN module working with multi-board project? That I don't know if it is at this point. It looks like Abe might be typing a question. I'm just not as up to date on the PDN and the Altium Designer. I'm more focused in the Altium 365, but thank you, Abe, for taking that one. And is signal integrity tools and add-ons working with multi-board IBIS models being leveraged? I would suspect that that might be down the road. I know simulation is probably going to be before the signal integrity. I don't have a concrete deadline on that, or I should say timeline of when that would be implemented. But if you would like, we can most certainly reach out. And the same for the SPICE models working with multi-board project. Again, that's a great area of emphasis right now from our product development team, but they really don't share like release timelines. But I can most certainly maybe investigate a little bit further on those and see if there is any more up-to-date information. And the last one is our comments for design reviews working through Altium 365 for multi-board projects. Again, when we can view those in the web view, I can almost assure you that they will be available for comments too, because that's the whole, that feature alone is such a time-saving one. So once we can view in the Altium 365, I am sure that the comments will follow closely behind that, if not at the same time. Another question, are comments and tasks the only thing that is the two-way with Altium 365? Those are primarily the way of communicating between, the items to-do list and what has been resolved, at least at this point. Not to say that there won't be something new, in future, but those are the way we do it now. Or can a parameter change also? Parameters, we do not have, again, those edits are still taking place in the Altium Designer at this point. If it's based on component or a parameter that might be associated with a design, a schematic, or a PCB document, for example, those are still pretty much leveraged from the Altium Designer tool, not in the web view. These are great areas and a lot of items that could go in, I'm sure, to our feature request or ideas page as well. I know a lot of individuals, and as you can see, we started with only just a view of a schematic and PCB, and now it's gone to all the documents. So you can imagine all the requests that we're getting at this point. And one more is the manufacturer part search, better in Pro. The manufacturer part search is all the same across the tools, or I should say the subscription levels. So that manufacturer part. The one thing I can say is we do have support for IHS in Pro subscription, which gives you, if the manufacturer is providing that that obsolescence of part, you can use the IHS market to determine what design or what components you want to design in based on that information in that data sheet. And so if you are a Pro subscriber, that is one of the things that is added, and our enterprise level is the IHS market data. Another question is, what is preferred way in Altium 365 to do inventory management? At this point, I would say our bill of materials is probably the best resource for that, because it shows the quantities you can see here and each of those components, but there isn't some global mechanism that you would see based on, quantities over, say, all the projects in the workspace for that particular one. It's going to be project by project based on quantities that are in the active BOM. So in the IHS example, this is going to be when you're choosing it, it's going to be from the manufacturer part search is where that data is going to come in. So here, if I were going in and if I had, say, Let's see, I'll just use one that I commonly point out here, E/SL, and it maybe doesn't. Let's go in our manufacturer. A lot of times here, you'll see the supply chain data, but it will also show, let's go and see if I can drag some of this information up. Excuse me. Here is that data sheet, the IHS market data sheet. So this is where it would launch you in, and provided that information is available, that data sheet would be within the manufacturer part search. And that could then, when you're using the single component editor, could be added into your component when you're creating it from scratch. And it looks like I have a lot of windows open here. But in the manufacturer part search is where you're going to search on that data. And then if I were creating a new component, I could bring that right in, or I can just save that to the server. If I do a right click and save to my workspace, it'll open up, and this is a processor, for example. So I'll just show that. And here's that IHS data sheet. So that's going to bring that right in. And then when I save this off to my server, that would be included. And that's what I'm going to use maybe to determine, but it's not going to show explicit data. It's just a data sheet. And if the manufacturer does provide that information for, end of life and a life cycle of the component, then you would be able to see that available as well. So it's an added feature with that pro subscription there. So hopefully that gives you a little more information about the IHS and how then when I place this component and I save this to my server, I could place it in my actual design and it would be available for use. And I would have that IHS data. And hopefully someone that's a librarian or someone in that role that is going to be, looking at that, they may want to go ahead and verify prior for me placing it actually into a design. So, and here now I'm saving it to my server. So hopefully those checks are done prior to me saving it off, because now that it's in my components and in my Altium 365 server, I can go in here and I'll just go back to all and I'll type in that. So anyone now would be able to see that particular component in my workspace and be able to place that in its entirety. And I'm not sure why it should be showing it here, because I just released it. Maybe did it release all the way? Oh, maybe I didn't release it. My apologies. I'm thinking I released it. I didn't push the save. Save to server. And it doesn't have any models. So this is an important one. It needs at least one model. That's why it didn't save. So I would need to add my model here in order to get this type to be able to save that. But you get the idea about the IHS, because now what it's going to do is it's going to come in. Once I save that, then I would be able to then place it from the components panel immediately after. My apologies, it didn't. Workspace rental costs without upgrade to Altium. We would have to get you in contact, because it's based on subscription level for the workspace. Whether you have standard, which is the subscription level of Altium Designer, Pro, or enterprise level, those are determined. And if needed, we can get you in touch with your account manager as well after, and they can really pinpoint all of those details for you. And it does look like all those questions have been answered. At this point in time, I know we're a little bit over, but again, great questions. We really appreciate your attendance, and John, Abe, I appreciate your help as well. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Can we save our cloud library to our local server? That you would use the item card. We actually don't go the other direction. You'll have to download those from Explorer or through the components panel, we don't have a batch way of getting those from Altium 365 to your local server. If you're trying to go from your local server, however, into the cloud, we have the item manager that can help you with that. But as far as going the other way, it's pretty much a one-by-one selection of download. And keep them synced. No, and I'm not sure how you're using it. A lot of people will need to have a separate list to send off to manufacturing, and so they need it outside of the Altium 365 workspace. If that's the reason why you're needing to download those and keep them separate, I would encourage you to invite those members into your workspace, and they would be able to see that data firsthand. So you don't have to keep synchronizing. They have all of that data readily available that they can preview as it's updated and keep that in sync. So you're not having to import, export, and constantly go back and forth. So just a little bit on that one as well. What is a limit? At this point in time for Altium 365, there isn't a limit on the data for components and or design data. If it become extreme amounts, I mean, at some point they may, put a quantitative monetary value, I should say, on that, but at this point it's pretty much limited, not limited, or unlimited, I should say. Great questions. Yeah. All right, I think we have officially gone ahead and got most of those questions answered. Again, you will receive a recording of all these, so if you have to go back and review anything, please feel free to reach out if you have questions after the fact. We were always glad to get people working and being successful in Altium 365. Thank you again. We appreciate your attendance. Bye-bye, everyone.